minutes. Please notify me when I'm left with 2 minutes. Monsieur le Président, nous avons assisté depuis 2014 à une trahison de valeurs et de principes et de promesses, parce que le rêve mauricien de 2014 reste vivant. Nous avons assisté à un manquement tragique de leadership et de bonne gouvernance. C'est grave. En 2014, avec Sanirou Jagannath comme Premier ministre, l'Alliance Les PEP avait fait les promesses suivantes. Premièrement, nous gouvernerons pour le peuple, avec le peuple, et dans l'esprit de toute la nation, pas pour nous, ni pour un petit groupe d'amis, d'agents politiques, de copains ou de copines. Deuxièmement, nous ferons la politique autrement. La discipline, la transparence, la redevabilité et la gouvernance exemplaire constitueraient la règle pour le Premier ministre. Les ministres, les députés, les conseillers, mais aussi à tous les niveaux, dans chaque ministère, organisme paraétatique et département de la fonction publique. Nous allons mettre en place un comité spécial pour mettre fin aux nominations inadaptées aux postes importants. Nous éliminerons les gaspillages. Nous comptons adopter une politique d'embauche fondée sur l'ouverture, la méritocratie et la transparence. Nous garantirons des chances égales à tous. Malheureusement, il y a eu en cours de route un changement de vision de Premier ministre et aujourd'hui, en 2019, que voyons-nous? Une pratique du pouvoir qui agit contre les intérêts du pays et de la nation. Un pouvoir cadenassé, replié sur lui-même, faisant tout pour assurer sa survie. Une violation de la méritocratie à tous les niveaux, le comble de la médiocrité et de l'incompétence. Le Financial Times a écrit ceci: There is a perception that too much power is in too few hands. Monsieur le Président, les conséquences: une catastrophe économique et financière de grande envergure, une crise sociale sans précédent, le pays peut flamber à n'importe quel moment, une démocratie en déroute, une grande crise morale, et on en a parlé longuement de ce côté de la Chambre, mais je me pose la question, qui sont les gens qui nous gouvernent? Parlons de l'establishment. Il y a un graphic artist qui est à la tête de la télévision nationale. Nous avons un steward à la tête de Airports Holding avec une compagnie nationale Air Mauritius à genoux avec 23 milliards de roupies. Nous avons une responsable de l'immobilier à la tête de Landscope avec 20 milliards. Nous avons eu un commissaire de police pendant quelque temps qui était par intérim. Nous avons un secrétaire pour Foreign Affairs avec un contrat mois par mois en attendant quelqu'un à être nommé. Et nous avons de plus en plus de hauts fonctionnaires sur contrat au cabinet, aux finances et à la CCID. Ils ont tous un seul certificat. Ils ont été sélectionnés par la cuisine. Ce gouvernement, Monsieur le Président, a perdu la confiance du peuple de par son incompétence et son indifférence. On parle souvent, on parle toujours de visionary leadership. Where is the vision? Where is the leadership? La dette est insoutenable, Monsieur le Président. Le système de pension est insoutenable. La crise énergétique sera insoutenable. La politique et les priorités de dépenses insoutenables. La misère du peuple aussi sera insoutenable. Et du côté de la majorité, on continue dans la même direction. Vous croyez bien faire, tout va bien, tout va très bien. Et il y aurait du côté de la majorité des Supermen, des Bahubali, qui, comme si rien n'a été construit avant. Tout le monde sait qu'est-ce qui a été construit depuis 2014. Nous avons des Bahubali pour dire que rien n'a été fait avant. Il y aurait...
No, which point of order?
Keep interrupting Honorable Boda. I wish for you to call them to order.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, il y aurait des Bahubali comme si rien n'a été construit avant. Pardon.
May I call to order all members to be quiet while the other speaker is speaking, please?
Il y aurait donc des Bahubali pour qui rien n'a été construit avant, mais tout sait qu'est-ce qui a été construit depuis 2014. Il y aurait des leaders de la trempe de Sivaji qui dirigent notre pays, qui se battent. Je me demande si ces Sivaji se battent pour la vérité, la droiture et la justice. Et le comble, c'est une découverte 30 ans après de politique. Et il y aurait aussi des gopis, G-O-P-I-S, qui lèvent la tête à Lord Krishna pour quelques contrats juteux. C'est ça la pratique du pouvoir à l'île Maurice aujourd'hui. But Prime Minister, the Speaker, I have two matters I want to set on record. First of all, regarding the recent survey, I personally do not believe in surveys. It is only the terrain. It's only the terrain which can always tell us the truth. But as you do believe in the surveys, let me say that the present alliance, according to the survey, can draw 11% of the electorate. In 2019, it was credited by 37% of the electorate. Does that mean that you have lost 70% of your voters? Second thing I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, is about the high-level committee on COVID chaired by the Prime Minister. I have three things to say. First, I was in charge of repatriation of some 10,000 stranded Mauritians and to bring back all the donations and all the equipment purchased by government. I would give an update on the repatriation and the flights and the transportation. We were never informed of what was being purchased, the numbers, the cost, and the name of suppliers. The ministry was asked to bring them, my ministry was asked to bring them to Mauritius. It was only later during question time that details emerged as to the 1.2 billion in emergency procurement and the dubious contracts which led to the tragic events later. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Yes. Listen. As for the ventilators, Mr. Speaker, sir, the name of Pack and Blisters as suppliers was mentioned by the Prime Minister and former Minister Saminaden. The former minister informed that the ventilators were to be collected first in Guangzhou, second in Hong Kong, later in Beijing. When it came to Beijing, the Prime Minister informed the committee that the ventilators were faulty. Later, we were informed that they would be supplied from Europe, and by that time, I had left the government. Third, as to the minutes of the meeting, no minutes were circulated amongst the members. However, the Prime Minister had an updated report daily, which was used as an agenda. This is the truth, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, leadership makes a big difference. When public sector leaders decide, it impacts on public trust in government.
You have 2 minutes.
The public does not have trust in this government because good leaders create and sustain cultures of integrity, competence, and service. This is not the case today. Mr. Speaker, sir, the MSM has lost its soul and its bearings, its principles and its values. I know it. Gone are the days of Sanirud and the leadership when all was based on hard work, on discipline, a sense of responsibility to the nation, decisiveness in the interest of the people when we take decisions, caution in the use of public funds, and repayment of debts before maturity. Today we have wastage for more than 70 billion. Debts for more than 400 billion. In the past, the government, the MSM government, repaid debts before majority. Today, we have the highest debt in our history. Monsieur le Président, je demande à la majorité de revenir aux vraies valeurs. I know you have a majority. I know you will not vote for this motion because it is written in your scripts which have been handed to you. But time comes, when you have to love your country more than your party. And this is how history is made. The motion is a wake-up call, Mr. Speaker, sir. The challenges are enormous: economic re-engineering, fighting the drug scourge, fighting poverty, address climate change, rebuild our democracy, food security. Let me say a few words to the new generation of the MSM honorable members on the other side.
Order.
Let me tell them, do not believe that the Bank of Mauritius belongs to the party in power. Second, that the police is at your beck and call. Third, that the key to the drawers of ICAC will always be in the same hands. Time will come. This country, Mr. Speaker, sir, is poised for change. You went to Plaine Mayon. We also went to Plaine Mayon. People want fundamental change for our constitution, the way the country is governed, but today it demands urgent action, as says the leader of the opposition, as regards to roti, kapra, and makan. They want a decent living. They want leadership. They want vision. And not politics for money
and power.
Thank you, sir.
Do I have 2 minutes?
Honorable Ganu. Honorable Ganu? I've finished. You are a man of communication. You know. Come on. I don't discuss. And you dare discuss with the chair. You want to become prime minister, eh? Honorable Ganu, you have 25 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Monsieur le Président, l'orateur qui m'a précédé a cité le nom de Sir Anirudh Jagannath comme son témoin. Je me demande s'il est au courant de ce que Sir Anirudh Jagannath a dit de lui après avoir quitté la banque MSM. Monsieur le Président, nous nous retrouvons aujourd'hui dans cette auguste assemblée. Monsieur le Président, this is injury time. Nous nous retrouvons aujourd'hui dans cette auguste assemblée devant une situation inédite. Nous avons d'un côté un gouvernement avec une majorité claire, confortable et cohérente qui est en train de mettre en œuvre, semaine après semaine, son programme dans la plus grande sérénité. Et en même temps, il s'attelle à gérer les conséquences de 2 grandes crises mondiales, en l'occurrence la pandémie du Covid-19 et la guerre Russie-Ukraine. De l'autre côté, nous avons une opposition sans direction, hétérogène, discréditée d'après un récent sondage, sans vision, mais qui a fait de la démagogie, de la haine et de la division, du dénigrement systématique des institutions et de ses adversaires, le socle même de son action politique. Cette motion de censure, manifestement, découle de ce cynisme. Elle a pour seul motif d'entretenir un climat de tension dans le pays pour saper le moral de la population et lui faire perdre confiance dans l'avenir du pays. C'est un jeu dangereux et infect auquel s'adonnent certains apprentis sorciers de l'opposition. Et ce, avec l'aide d'autres fauteurs de troubles patentés et anarchistes qui, du reste, portent de lourdes responsabilités dans les violences qu'avait connues le pays dans le passé et qui ont malheureusement laissé des graves séquelles au sein de notre société plurielle. Ils ont essayé d'inciter par procuration une dynamique d'agitation populaire à travers le pays. Ils essayent de récupérer une conjoncture de crise mondiale pour semer la panique et déstabiliser le pays. En vérité, comme ont dit quelques amis avant moi de ce côté de la Chambre, nous devrions remercier le leader de l'opposition qui, par le biais de cette motion, nous permet de rétablir la vérité sur beaucoup de sujets, sur ces faux procès, ces contre-vérités et d'autres attaques viles et mensongères. Dans le même souffle, cet exercice nous permet d'éclairer la population sur le contexte international extrêmement difficile et sans précédent et valoriser nos innombrables actions politiques visant à hisser le pays vers de nouveaux sommets. Monsieur le Président, ce gouvernement est pleinement conscient des difficultés que font face les ménages à faibles et moyens revenus face à la hausse du coût de la vie, conséquence des crises combinées du Covid et de la guerre en Europe. Mes collègues ministres et moi-même, sous le leadership du Premier ministre, nous restons fortement mobilisés à la fois sur les urgences et sur les grands enjeux de notre développement et du bien-être de la population. Nous sommes un gouvernement qui est à l'écoute de la population grâce à sa politique de proximité avec le peuple. Nous sommes avec le peuple. Nous n'avons pas de leçons de solidarité ou de proximité à prendre de l'opposition. Monsieur le Président, une motion de censure contre un gouvernement n'a sa pertinence lorsque celui-ci est à bout de souffle, lorsque sa majorité vacille, lorsque les fractures internes l'empêchent de fonctionner, lorsque, par ses inactions, ses inerties ou par son incompétence, l'appareil économique est en panne. Or, aucun de ces scénarios n'est à l'ordre du jour et je n'en entrevois aucun à l'avenir. Cette motion de censure n'est qu'une autre manœuvre après l'échec manifeste de la tactique des pétitions électorales pour discréditer un gouvernement dûment élu et résolument performant. Si l'opposition veut prendre la place de la majorité gouvernementale, qu'elle attende et se présente devant l'électorat à la fin de la présente législature. Il n'y a pas de raccourci malheureusement pour eux, sauf s'ils veulent transgresser ou dénaturer le processus démocratique. Qu'est-ce que l'opposition reproche à ce gouvernement, Monsieur le Président? Peut-on lui reprocher de n'avoir pas protégé les vies humaines et la santé de notre population pendant la pandémie du Covid-19 ou de n'avoir pas entrepris un programme de vaccination des plus ambitieux pour protéger la population contre le Covid et créer les conditions de reprise économique? J'ai avec moi le récent document de l'IMF, Monsieur le Président. Je cite quelques lignes. Mauritius is gradually recovering from the pandemic. The public health impact of the pandemic was well managed, including by a remarkable vaccination campaign, covering over 90% of the eligible population by May 2022. Large and comprehensive support measures help cushion the social and economic impact of the pandemic. Fin de citation. Voilà, Monsieur le Président, voilà ce que dit le IMF Staff Complete 2022 Article 4 Mission to Mauritius. Voilà ce qu'elle dit, ce que ce rapport dit sur la pandémie. Et rappelons-nous, Monsieur le Président, de cette campagne de haine, de harcèlement et les demandes régulières de la démission de notre ministre de la Santé. Voilà un certificat de compétence émis par la IMF, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, que peut-on reprocher l'opposition d'avoir évité? Peut-on reprocher ce gouvernement d'avoir évité les licenciements en masse pendant la crise du Covid? Peut-on lui reprocher d'avoir protégé les salariés, de ne pas avoir protégé les salariés et les travailleurs indépendants pendant les 2 confinements? Peut-on lui reprocher de n'avoir pas pu maintenir le tissu économique et l'appareil de production et éviter les faillites d'entreprises en grand nombre? Monsieur le Président, peu de pays au monde ont pu accomplir ce que nous avons pu faire en termes de soutien à la population pendant la crise. La Banque mondiale classe Maurice 4e pays au monde à ce chapitre. Le gouvernement a mobilisé l'équivalent de 32% du PIB, soit environ 80 milliards pour protéger autant que possible les travailleurs, les ménages et les entreprises. Nous avons mis plus de 27 milliards dans les Wage Assistance Scheme au bénéfice de plus de 500 000 salariés du secteur privé et travailleurs indépendants. Nous avons pu éviter une crise sociale et nous avons assuré une certaine sécurité aux groupes les plus vulnérables. Il s'agit là, Monsieur le Président, d'une intervention colossale et sans précédent. Il est évident que les méthodes conventionnelles n'allaient pas marcher. Pratiquement toutes les banques centrales du monde ont dû intervenir pour sauver leurs économies nationales. Pratiquement tous les gouvernements ont dû emprunter pour protéger leur population et leur pays. Mais malheureusement, d'autres dangers nous guettent. La guerre en Ukraine est venue déstabiliser une économie mondiale encore fragile qui s'est relevée à peine de la pandémie. Le monde est entré dans une nouvelle phase d'incertitude et des risques économiques et sociaux. L'opposition, pourtant, Monsieur le Président, semble être complètement déconnectée de cette nouvelle réalité. Il serait bon de leur rappeler certaines vérités. Et à entendre les membres de l'opposition, on se demande si elle vit sur la même planète que la nôtre. Ce conflit, selon le FMI, est en train de provoquer le plus grand choc sur les produits énergétiques et alimentaires depuis plus de 50 ans, provoquant une resurgence rapide de l'inflation à travers le monde. Les augmentations des prix des produits de base commencent à déboucher sur des crises humanitaires dans plusieurs pays. La Banque mondiale prévient que pour chaque point de pourcentage de hausse dans les denrées alimentaires sur le marché mondial, 10 millions de personnes basculeront dans la pauvreté extrême. Les prix énergétiques devraient connaître une hausse de 50% par rapport à l'année précédente. Le coût du baril de Brent tournera en moyenne autour de $100 en 2022, selon les dernières prévisions de la Banque mondiale. Les prix alimentaires en avril 2022 demeurent, eux, 30% plus élevés qu'à la même période l'année dernière, selon le FAO, Food Price Index, Monsieur le Président. Donc, do we really understand the contours of this hecatomb, Monsieur le Président? Voilà pourquoi, aujourd'hui, world oil prices are increasing, comme je viens de dire, by 33%. Le prix du charbon par 80%. Gas prices par 85% en Europe, 10% in North America, 20% in the rest of the world. World food prices are raised by a weighted average of 6%, with wheat prices up to 90%, corn prices 40%, and all other index components assumed to remain unchanged. Fertilizer prices by 30%, Monsieur le Président. Mais il n'y a pas que le choc de prix. La croissance mondiale est également menacée, ce qui complique davantage la gestion de cette crise par les gouvernements et les banques centrales. The effects of the war will propagate far and wide, adding to price pressures and exacerbating policy challenges, affirmé le FMI dans une récente observation. Et Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas parlé de la crise dans le container ship industry. Je n'ai pas parlé de la crise et la hausse de freight prices par faute de temps. Mais Monsieur le Président, la FMI que je viens de citer dit s'inquiéter que les perspectives de croissance s'assombrissent alors que l'inflation s'accélère. Elle rappelle que même avant la guerre, plusieurs pays souffraient de la hausse des prix en raison des perturbations dans la chaîne de distribution internationale à cause de la pandémie. Les récents confinements en Chine sont venus aggraver la conjoncture. Dans le dernier World Economic Outlook, le FMI projette une chute notable de la croissance mondiale de 6,1% en 2021 à 3,6% en 2022. L'Organisation mondiale du commerce, le WTO, Monsieur le Président, rappelle pour sa part que la production de nourriture, de l'énergie, des fertilisants en Ukraine et en Russie, deux gros fournisseurs mondiaux de ces marchandises, est fortement entravée et qu'il y a en conséquence des risques pour la sécurité alimentaire dans les pays pauvres. Permettez-moi, Monsieur le Président, de citer la directrice générale de l'OMC, Mme Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Je cite, "The war in Ukraine has created immense human suffering, but it has also damaged the global economy at a critical juncture. Its impact will be felt around the world, particularly in low-income countries where food accounts for a large fraction of household spending." Fin de citation. Les prix donc vont rester sous forte pression à l'échelle planétaire en 2022, avec une projection de l'inflation de 5,7% dans les pays avancés et 8,7% dans les pays émergents et en développement. Ce scénario de croissance réduite et de prix élevés met en évidence les risques d'une croissance mondiale inégale avec des dangers de crise humanitaire dans les pays pauvres et à moyen revenu. Monsieur le Président, à cet effet, l'ONCTAD met en garde une situation très inquiétante pour l'Afrique et les pays sous-développés qui sont les plus exposés à la guerre Russie-Ukraine, à la hausse des prix mondiaux et la volatilité des marchés financiers. C'est un défi extraordinaire à relever pour la planète. Même les pays avancés et aussi les grands pays producteurs alimentaires sont affectés par ce dérapage inflationniste. Nous avons tous vu, Monsieur le Président, comment le pouvoir d'achat joue un rôle déterminant aujourd'hui dans les élections présidentielles ou dans les autres pays, et il sera encore le cas dans l'avenir. Monsieur le Président, nous, ici à Maurice, comme un caring government, nous sommes restés très attentifs à cette situation. Depuis juillet de l'année dernière, nous avons mis 1,2 milliard pour subventionner 7 produits alimentaires les plus consommés par les ménages mauriciens. La semaine dernière, le gouvernement a décidé d'accorder une somme additionnelle de 150 millions sur les subventions pour maintenir les prix de ces produits. Dans le même souffle, le gouvernement a accordé une subvention additionnelle aux boulangeries pour qu'elles puissent maintenir le prix du pain maison à 2,60 € à l'unité. Par ailleurs, le Premier ministre a récemment annoncé que le markup sur 15 médicaments les plus consommés sont revus à la baisse pour qu'ils continuent à être accessibles à la population. Le gouvernement continue de travailler sur plusieurs pistes pour faire face à cette situation et protéger le pouvoir d'achat de ceux au bas de l'échelle. Monsieur le Président, il faut donc se rappeler que le gouvernement a pris des actions proactives pour soutenir le pouvoir d'achat de nos compatriotes. Nous avons décrété pour l'année 2022 une compensation salariale de 500 roupies pour les salariés qui touchent jusqu'à 13 000 roupies mensuellement et 400 roupies pour ceux qui touchent plus. Aucun gouvernement n'a fait autant pour combattre les inégalités sociales dans ce pays. Nous avons introduit la mesure historique du salaire minimum que nous avons augmenté, qui est aujourd'hui à 11 075 roupies, et aussi le negative income tax. Le gouvernement a augmenté la pension de vieillesse, comme nous le savons tous. Nous avons mis en place un programme d'accompagnement en faveur des familles en situation d'extrême précarité dans le cadre du Marshall Plan. Toutefois, Monsieur le Président, malgré tous ces efforts, il y a des hausses des prix qui sont inévitables. Les augmentations dans le prix du carburant nous ont obligés, comme nous le savons tous, à procéder à une augmentation du ticket d'autobus et du métro. La dernière majoration du ticket d'autobus, comme je l'ai rappelé au Parlement mardi dernier, remonte à plus de 10 ans. Monsieur le Président, il m'est utile maintenant de revenir sur ce que l'opposition a dit sur toute cette question de the current pricing structure of petrol. Monsieur Ramphal, l'honorable Ramphal, a aussi fait mention de ce problème lors de son discours. Revenons sur les faits, Monsieur le Président. C'est vrai, there is a structure which determines, a price structure which determines the price of petroleum products. In fact, there are several levies, and indeed, one of them amounts to 4 roupies 20. C'est vrai dans ce price structure. Mais ce levier de 4 roupies 20, Monsieur le Président, qui nous ramène au gouvernement et qui ramenait à tous les autres gouvernements aussi, ce price structure, tous ces différents levies-là, n'existent pas depuis que le MSM est au gouvernement. Il a toujours existé sous le gouvernement travailliste. De temps en temps, évidemment, tous les gouvernements changent, ajustent et baissent ou montent ces levies, Monsieur le Président. Pour le moment, donc, il y a 4 roupies 20, un levier de 4 roupies 20 pour le subsidy rice flour, etc. Ce levier de 4 roupies 20 nous rapporte par an, Monsieur le Président, presque plus d'1 milliard de roupies, c'est vrai. Mais que fait-on de cet argent? C'est servi comme un cross-subsidy, c'est utilisé comme un cross-subsidy pour une redistribution de la richesse, Monsieur le Président. It is this subsidy per litre, de 4 roupies 20 per litre of mogas and gas oil, which help the government to maintain a reasonable level of prices on these different commodities, Monsieur le Président. Donc, this cross-subsidy has been enables us to sell to our merchant household, small business, thousands of other merchant citizens, pour une année, avec le 4 roupies 20, 75 000 metric tons de cooking gas, 95 000 metric tons de flour, 25 000 metric tons de long grain white rice, 190 metric tons de basmati rice, and finally, 110 metric tons of sugar for our brothers from Rodrigue. This is what is made of this levy of 4 roupies 20 qui nous ramène, comme je viens de vous dire, Monsieur le Président, presque 1 milliard de roupies par an. Et c'est pourquoi, Monsieur le Président, we can sell the cooking gas at the price that we are selling today. Parce que sinon, j'ai un tableau avec moi qui démontre, Monsieur le Président, quelle est la différence que ça fait without subsidy. Et quand on compare avec ce qui se passe à Madagascar, à Seychelles, à Réunion, à South Africa, à India, the retail price of a LPG cylinder of 12 kg à Madagascar est à 850 roupies. Seychelles, 628 roupies 92. Réunion, 1033 roupies 87. South Africa, 1284 roupies 52. India, 447 roupies, Monsieur le Président. Et combien nous payons notre bonbonne de gaz de 12 kilos? Nous le savons tous, Monsieur le Président. Alors, voilà Quelle utilisation on fait de ce levier de 4 roupies 20 sur chaque litre de gasoil et de mogas? Similairement, une roupie 60 qui représente un autre levier nous permet de collecter 700 millions de roupies que nous utilisons dans le transport industry. Subsidize the operators. Si on withdraw ce subsidy, le prix de ticket qu'on vient d'augmenter à 31% aurait dû être augmenté à 110%, Monsieur le Président. Je peux vous montrer les calculs. C'est 700 millions qu'on collecte avec ce levier sur chaque litre nous permet d'injecter 700 millions de roupies dans le transport industry et nous a permis à garder le prix de ticket à 31%. Sinon, sans subsidy, le prix du ticket aurait été 110%, Monsieur le Président. Et nous savons tous, when times allowed us, a gas cylinder was 180 roupies en juin 2020, Monsieur le Président. It was the lowest price over the past 20 years. Mais je dois vous dire, Monsieur le Président, que sous l'ancien gouvernement, nous voyons quel était le prix d'une bonbonne de gaz, quel était le prix des produits pétroliers, du mogas et du gasoil. En 23 juin 2009, le leader de l'opposition d'alors, M. Béranger, avait même présenté une motion of disallowance against the increase of price of petrol contre le gouvernement travailliste. Et voilà ce qu'il disait, je le cite. This is what has provoked this most recent increase in the price of diesel and l'essence. An accumulation of incompetence, scandale et abus en tout genre. I would not hesitate to say that indeed, through this, what I call this hold-up, the consumer public and the traveling public se sont fait détrousser au fil des années and through this most recent increase. C'est ce que je disais dans ma réponse, Monsieur le Président. Sous le gouvernement de travail, il y avait des increases, il y avait des augmentations. Et voilà donc le leader de l'opposition d'alors qui n'était pas d'accord et qui était venu avec une motion of disallowance. Monsieur le Président, c'est la même chose. Le leader de l'opposition avait parlé. Pourquoi fallait-il mettre un levier pour les vaccins? Parce qu'on a tous ces vaccins-là en cadeau avec les pays étrangers. Monsieur le Président, c'est vrai. Laissez-moi rétablir la vérité. A total of 2 708 840 COVID-19 vaccines have been procured at the cost of 1.6 milliard rupees from the National COVID Vaccination Program Fund, which represent not only the cost of the vaccines, but also the freight charges, insurance costs, and other logistics. A levy of 2 rupees per litre on mogas and diesel has been introduced for the purchase of these vaccines. The vaccines procured are as follows: 100 800 doses Oxford AstraZeneca, 100 000 doses of Covishield, 200 000 doses of Covaxin, 1 500 000 doses of Sinopharm, 60 000 doses of Component 1 and 60 000 doses of Component 2 of Sputnik, 288 000 doses of Johnson Johnson, 400 000 doses of Pfizer vaccine. On a acheté tout ça, Monsieur le Président. On n'a pas eu cadeau. On a eu des donations. Il faut le reconnaître. Et nous sommes reconnaissants envers ces pays, envers l'Inde, envers la Chine, envers l'Afrique du Sud, envers le UAE, USA, France, UK, African Union, etc. Mais seulement, les vaccins qu'on a eus en donation, évidemment, n'ont pas suffi. C'est pourquoi, comme je viens de vous dire, Monsieur le Président, 2 708 840 vaccins were procured at the cost of 1.6 million rupees. Voilà pourquoi ce levier de 2 millions de roupies a été imposé pour pouvoir protéger notre population, vacciner notre population et assurer la santé de notre population, Monsieur le Président. Donc, le développement il y a un autre argument que l'opposition a fait la dernière fois, le leader de l'opposition, concernant le développement. Et je crois réellement que c'est la démagogie. Quand le leader de l'opposition demande de geler les projets de développement parce que les prix augmentent dans les supermarchés. Le développement de l'infrastructure est vital pour l'efficience et la compétitivité économique du pays, mais aussi pour la qualité de la vie et la sécurité de la population, Monsieur le Président.
No, what is this?
Nous allons
What is this?
Nous allons continuer à bâtir les capacités de notre pays, car elles sont essentielles pour assurer le progrès et le bien-être de la population. On n'arrête pas le développement lorsque nous avons un problème. Au contraire, il nous faut investir, générer plus de croissance et augmenter les revenus et le pouvoir d'achat des Mauriciens. L'investissement public, Monsieur le Président, répond aussi à une exigence de justice sociale. Bientôt, nous allons démarrer un des plus grands programmes de logement social jamais entrepris à Maurice, avec la construction de 12 000 maisons dans les différentes régions du pays. J'entends souvent, Monsieur le Président, l'opposition parler d'éléphants blancs. C'est ce qu'il disait. Certains partis politiques disaient, alors qu'on allait construire le Cyber City, vous allez vous rappeler, dans les années 2000 à 2005, Monsieur le Président. Aujourd'hui, c'est la même chose avec le métro. On fait le procès du métro, Monsieur le Président. 4 bornes Phoenix, qu'on vient d'inaugurer dimanche, nous rapportent déjà 3 500 passagers chaque jour, Monsieur le Président. 23% en plus de 4 bornes à Phoenix, déjà, d'après les surveys préliminaires qu'on a fait. Donc, le métro n'est pas un failure. Au contraire, Monsieur le Président, c'est une réalité aujourd'hui dans notre paysage du transport, dans notre écosystème à Maurice. Idem pour le programme de décongestion routière. Mon ami, le ministre Euriram, vient d'en parler, Monsieur le Président. Pour moi, aujourd'hui, ce qu'on assiste, c'est la démagogie dans toute sa splendeur. Cette opposition persiste et signe, malgré ce sondage, pourtant par un groupe de presse, pourtant acquis à sa cause. Et ces sondages prévoient la déroute inévitable de l'opposition aux prochaines élections. Nous sommes nullement perturbés par les tentatives de déstabilisation de l'opposition. Du reste, toutes ces tentatives ont échoué, l'une après l'autre. Nous allons continuer à œuvrer dans la sérénité, Monsieur le Président. Mais avant de terminer, je ne peux m'empêcher de dénoncer le caractère antipatriotique et grotesque de cette motion de censure. Antipatriotique parce que voilà une opposition qui, alors que ce gouvernement, affligé par des compounding crises sans précédent, Monsieur le Président, à l'époque, pendant le gouvernement MSM 2000-2005, on parlait de situation économique urgente. En urgence. L'honorable Sitanen parlait, quand il était ministre des Finances, des triple chocs. Mais aujourd'hui, ce que nous assistons dans le monde, comme je viens de le décrire, est sans précédent. Voilà qu'un gouvernement affligé par ces crises, qui marche sur une corde raide, qui s'implique, Monsieur le Président, pour garder les grands équilibres, pour faire de l'acrobatie économique. Voilà une opposition qui choisit de nous tirer une balle dans le dos. C'est ça, cette motion de censure. Je vous parlais de grotesque. Grotesque parce que cette opposition qui prétend réclamer la démission du gouvernement ne pèse pas plus de 7% dans les meilleurs des cas, d'après le sondage. Le Premier ministre préféré de la population reste Pravin Kumar Jagannath, d'après le sondage, Monsieur le Président. Et avec le 21% d'intention qu'il a recueilli dans ce survey, dans ce opinion poll, dans ce sondage, il talonne de loin son challenger avec seulement 11% derrière lui. Monsieur le Président, honorable Pravin Jagannath reste le chouchou, pas le chouchou de Sikien, reste le chouchou de nos senior citizens, d'après ce sondage, Monsieur le Président. C'est cette opposition qui a l'audace, de présenter une motion de censure contre le gouvernement. Quant à nous, nous restons stoïques et zen, Monsieur le Président. Nous restons zen parce que j'ai avec moi, encore une fois, le même document que je vais citer, le IMF Staff Complete Article Mission Mauritius, qui vient d'être fait, Monsieur le Président. Ils étaient là la semaine dernière. Je vous cite quelques mots, quelques phrases. The economy is gradually recovering from the pandemic as the recovery solidifies. Whilst most sectors have returned to pre-pandemic levels of economic activity and the tourism sector is gradually recovering, staff projects growth of 6.1% in 2022. Monsieur le Président, nevertheless, the recovery is expected to continue, driven essentially by the tourism sector. Pourquoi donc, Monsieur le Président, une motion de censure vis-à-vis un gouvernement après avoir traversé tous ces moments de difficulté? Et je conclus en rappelant à l'Assemblée aussi le Africa Wealth Report de 2022, indiquant que Maurice est le pays le plus riche en Afrique par tête d'habitant, devant l'Afrique du Sud et la Namibie, et que la performance de Maurice dans ce segment va connaître une forte progression de l'ordre de 80% pendant les 10 prochaines années. Monsieur le Président, nous avons confiance en notre capacité de rebondir. Après ce bourrasque au niveau mondial, viendra le printemps. À la fin de chaque crépuscule se lève une aube radieuse, Monsieur le Président. Le temps venu, le peuple saura choisir. Nous sommes les héritiers de l'avenir. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker.
Last time I record, you have 30 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we have been privileged to some hysterical speeches made by members on the government bench. And I can understand, it's what I call in defense of the indefensible. Why? It's simple, because this is the best government that money can buy. The best government that money can buy. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition has moved the people's motion. And it's not a motion which has been moved lightly. It's been moved after discussions with all stakeholders and with those who are suffering, those who are worried whether they'll still have a roof over their head, those who are worried whether the kitchen will run smoothly, as to whether they'll be able to honor their loan commitments. This is the harsh reality. People don't give a damn in relation to quotations or citations being made from findings of reports. This will not enable them to walk on a full belly, Mr. Speaker. The situation is totally different from what is being spelled out in this chamber. And why is it that people are worried? Because we have a government, Mr. Speaker, which is ruthless, which is mean, and we will stand up to this government. A government which is heartless. I hear our honorable friend, Honorable Ganu, saying that there are subsidies to support those at the lower rung of the ladder. But these subsidies are being borne by taxpayers. They don't run a charitable institution, Mr. Speaker. This is money coming out from the pocket of taxpayers. So, what are you saying? You're saying nothing. Trying simply, and let me tell you, you're trying to sell dreams. You're trying to sell dreams. Mr. Speaker, let me remind our friends on the other side of the House not only people can see through them, but their coordinated action under instruction from the political arm of the executive means that institutions are dancing to the tune of the regime. And this is unacceptable. What this country is craving for, separation of power, Mr. Speaker, sir. We cannot have instructions, and these instructions are coming from higher quarters. And we've seen what has happened in the recent past. And this is a habit that started, an ugly habit, which started since 2015. I have in mind, of course, the number of arrests, arbitrary arrests made. And you're telling me the international community is not aware of what is happening here? VDEM is an institute run by the Labour Party when it stated blatantly that this is an autocratic government. VDEM is not paid by the Labour Party to write articles on a government which shows no respect for institutions and which, in fact, exercises undue influence upon those institutions. Mr. Speaker, let me tell those who are listening, and I tell them not to be bystanders. Stand up and be counted. You know, we know the circumstances under which a former prime minister was arrested and put behind bars, not even for flimsy reasons, but for mere political reasons. And I tell the public to watch their back, because if you're not with them, they assume that you're against them. And then they'll exercise undue pressure at times to make people step down, force them to quit the job, resign or else. This is the kind of government that we have. And I will come back to the poll survey. And then you'll realize what you're worth as a party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen cases of, and we've seen police arresting innocent people in the early hours of the morning, in the presence of their family, on trumped-up charges. This is the government that is running this country today, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, what do you want us to do as an opposition? We don't move a motion of no confidence? We allow elected dictatorship to flourish? Is that what they want us to do? And Mr. Speaker, there are some people on the other side of the House. Though you can count on the figure, there are few who are decent. And I will single out one person. Honorable Colin Davilu knows what I'm saying. Perhaps if he were a member of the cabinet, he could have dispensed sound advice. But we know that it's too late for redemption. Let me tell them, they have been written off. Because Parliament, as we say, yes, it is the temple of democracy, but not the be-all and the end-all of democracy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, irrespective of the hue and cry from the government bench, 63.5% of the electorate voted against the MSM and its appendages and voted for the opposition at the last general election. We represent the people in this House. If I take on board those who abstain, then the percentage of the electorate which has turned its back on the regime is as high as 70%. Of course, Honorable Ganu is right. There are lessons to be drawn from the opinion poll conducted by le Mauricien Straconsul. But what did it say? 82% of eligible voters have conveyed loud and clear that they will cast their vote, and they are eager for snap election. This is significant, and a high turnout will mean a massive defeat for the MSM at the next election, Mr. Speaker. That's why the MSM is sweating in fear of the electorate and has rescheduled the municipal election, the vast majority of the electorate says enough is enough. And let us look at the polls. This information has not been released to the press. They tell us that in order of priority, the problem of poverty ranks very high. Poor management of the economy, unemployment, drug scourge, water, fraud and corruption are the core issues. On all counts, the regime failed and failed abysmally. But could things be otherwise coming from a leader who is at the helm of a morally bankrupt regime? The motion is an opportunity for the regime to do the right thing, to think wisely and say the way forward is to go for the dissolution of parliament and let the people speak, not you who are sitting on government bench, a government which money can buy. This is the government that we have today, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, whoever has the new mandate knows that they are challenging times. This is a rallying call for fundamental changes. Some call it, or some call those changes, constructive destruction. People are sick and tired of being shackled to money politics, to communal politics, to mafia politics, to fake news, to arbitrary arrest, and the gaping disparity between the haves and the have-not. This is the outcome of the tyranny of numbers and incompetency, the absolute power that corrupts absolutely. MSM culture is a culture with no restraint. And what's the political worth of the MSM of Pravin Jagannath? Like, worth nothing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Big note without a figure. A clan not too different from the Rajapaksa of Sri Lanka. The country does not deserve the MSM. What is the MSM? It is a tent pitched in the back garden to celebrate wedding and to mourn a loss. The wake and the wedding party are over. Now it is time to dismantle the tent. Who knows MSM better than the former Secretary General? Let me tell some of our friends on the government side, time to leave the barge. The barge is sinking fast. Mr. Speaker, I want to set the record high over assurances and certainty given by the Attorney General and Minister of Agro-Industry to rebut a seasoned politician like Honorable Bhagwan. He was right to challenge any of the minister to go for a walk down street unaccompanied by bodyguards. They will quake in the boots. And this cabinet of ministers is, Mr. Speaker, sir, inadequate, unable to respond to the needs of the electorate. Promises made, and they are false promises. And they are not only to be blamed. Mr. Speaker, when I look at the political parkour of Pravin Jagannath, he has to be grateful to the Labour Party. He has to be grateful to the Labour Party. And if it were not for the Labour Party in 2008, he would never have returned. It's an amazing twist of history. Government helping a member of the opposition to be returned and to sit as leader of opposition. This is incestuous relationship. But we had to do it because who asked for that? We had to do it at the request of your dad. That's right. That's right, we had to do it. I say it, and I know for certain, Mr. Speaker. And I know for certain, Mr. Speaker. And I know, order. But let me tell you one thing.
Order on both sides of the House. Order. Order on both sides of the House. Both sides. Am I talking to you? Am I talking to you? I said order on both sides of the House. I said order on both sides of the House, including you. You continue.
Mr.
Order.
Speaker,
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, every time the MSM has negotiated an alliance, it is not to safeguard the interests of the electorate. It is not to protect the interests of the electorate. It is not to encourage social mobility, but to protect the interests of centrists, to protect the heirloom family. That's the MSM, Mr. Speaker. And as long as I am in Labour Party, there will be no iota of rapprochement with the MSM, and I'll see to it that it will never happen. And I will see to it, it will never happen.
Order! Order! Please continue.
Mr. Speaker, born a Labourite, here today and here to stay, Labour Party will live up to the expectation of the people of the nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me come to what the Attorney General stated. And he gave firm assurances to the nation that the former Minister of Foreign Affairs Regional Integration, International Trade, would remain within the rec and file of the MSM. And the information was broadcast on all radio and social media, announced as breaking news. If a former Secretary General of the MSM deem it fit to resign as minister and quit as Secretary General of his party, then it stands to reason that the MSM of Pravin Jagnnath is an inevitable impending disaster. It is an inevitable impending disaster. And Honorable Buddha's message was clear. All others will follow. In Indian file, when the MSM will take a good hiding at the municipal elections, which would be a foretaste of a crushing defeat of the MSM at the next general election. And trust me, I've been in politics long enough to know where the cracks are. And the cracks are all over the government bench. And I can tell you, those who are fighting amongst themselves to be within cabinet. And I know, because they talk, they feel aggrieved, they feel that they've been let down, set aside by a leader whose main interest is to protect, the rich, the filthy, and the wealthy, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, there is a correlationship between perception and reality. And let me tell you, you are selling dreams with perception. The reality is out there. And I walk all over the place. And I know people. My life in politics has been one of interaction with people. Because I love what I'm doing. And I know for certain, irrespective of your stinking, dirty money, irrespective of the influence that you want to exercise, irrespective, Mr. Speaker, sir, of...
Excuse me. Let me remind honorable members, it is true I can't see exactly who is making noise. But believe me, if I find the exact person, I'll ask him to withdraw from the chamber.
Mr. Speaker, sir, irrespective of the number of bouncers hanging around, and irrespective of means which they can resort to and use, the people of this country have seen through them. The people know what they're worth. And I can say, without fear of prejudice, your days are numbered. Now we'll come to the poll survey in a minute, Mr. Speaker, sir. And let me say, as I said, if a former Secretary General of the MSM deem it fit to resign as Minister and quit as Secretary General, it means that you're in deep trouble. And Mr. Speaker, as to the appendage of his party, there is no way that Honorable Colin Davelu would be back in the cabinet of ministers, because he has become a deliberate omission. I triggered his departure following the PNQ on Saint-Louis Gate. He is still in the corridor waiting and confined to a back seat. Where the outcome of the inquiry to find out of any alleged involvement with the Danish firm over kickback? Pravin Jagnnath wants to keep him out of bounds. Nothing more, nothing less. The leader of ML has been reduced to a note without a figure. Mr. Speaker, following PQ put by Honorable Assia Vaden, the Minister of Energy in his reply rubbed in to say that free subsidiaries of CB were a waste of resources. And it's been announced that CB financiers are in the red and its tariff will go up by 12%. Minister Lejroga, with a wry smile, was of course hitting hard at his predecessor, the former DPM, who is now a lonesome cowboy. His party is defunct, and the two MPs have already been sucked into the vortex of the MSM. And I'm told that he was the architect of the Public Prosecution Commission, which collapsed like a pack of cards when PMSD made a honorable exit from government in 2016. But Honorable Colin Davelu reminds me of the hunters being hunted, Mr. Speaker. And let me give him credit for one thing. Honorable Colin Davelu is too dignified to make a plea to be reinstated as cabinet minister. And there are many wolves on the other side, werewolf, waiting for an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir, to be a member of that cabinet. But as to Honorable Ganu, he is politically insignificant, indignant, and deserves to be treated with contempt. Tell the country, Minister, what government would do to reimburse the fares of 40,000 civil servants. What facilities are being extended to private sector to meet the increase in bus fares being borne presently by 90,000 employees. Besides, 20,000 university students are waiting to have their pass. They cannot be left unattended, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Ganu, you can't interrupt the member. Please, you're not on a point of order. I am interfering. Please, I'm intervening. Please, keep quiet, you. You, qui arrivez, keep quiet. This is qui arrivez. Please, keep quiet. Honorable Ganu, allow the member to continue. And believe me, this is the last warning I'm in. Is it a point of order? Yes. Come with your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the honourable member mentioned my name and told that I was indignant, but I never fled from my constituency.
So this is not the point of order. To whom are you talking? To whom are you talking? You sit down there. You have no point of order. I have to rule. I have to rule. But don't discuss with me. Don't discuss with me. Keep quiet. Let me rule. I am the speaker. I rule. Not you. Not you. You have no point of order, please. You have no point of order. Leave it there. You continue. You have no point of order. You continue.
I can understand the honourable member because he's been caught with his pants down.
Go to your speech.
Mr. Speaker.
Let me remind you, you have only 2 minutes.
It doesn't matter. But they've been hurt, and badly hurt. Mr. Speaker, let me come to the reply given by the Honourable Minister in relation to the increase in tariff buses, who stated that there were free increases in bus fares in 2008, 10, and 13, and the average increase during that period of 5 years was 31%, which is similar to the present average increase of 31%, although the stretch of time is 9 years. In this time, it is not true. And he added that the average increase is the same as that under the Labour Party from 2008 to 2013, although the price of diesel was much lower at that time, Mr. Speaker. The free increases in tariff of bus fares under the Labour government was due to increase in wages and salaries and conditions of service that were imposed upon the bus industry, which represents 60% of the operating costs of the industry as compared to 20% represented by diesel costs. What are you waiting, Minister, to ease off the financial burden of these workers? It's time for you to write your political epilogue. Mr. Speaker, since time is running out, let me tell them we cannot in this country carry on with what I call sanitary dictatorship. It's time to allow people to take off the mask. Because the first to break, Mr. Speaker, the first to break those restrictions are people sitting on the government bench. Time, Mr. Speaker, to allow the people to get on the bikes, roll up their sleeves, and work to make sure that this country becomes more productive. Mr. Speaker, and I challenge, earlier I didn't have time to reply to the Minister of Solid Waste, but let me tell him one thing. He had the opportunity to depone before the Court of Investigation set under the chairmanship of Hamad. They chose to stay away, him, Prime Minister, and the Minister of Fisheries, Mr. And yet, they are the people who said that that all appropriate measures were taken to address the problem of leakage of oil from Wakashu. Today, this country has become a reputation because of mismanagement by government. And then you are saying that you are in defense of Mauritius to ensure that we champion the cause of climate change. You're the one who needs to be changed, Mr. Speaker. You are the one who needs to be changed. Let me, Mr. Speaker, say they have, go and read the financial statement of State Bank. Impairment of more than 12 billion rupees. They've run down Air Mauritius. Today, shareholders who purchase shares by 60 rupees a share. These shares have been compulsory acquired and 5 rupees 30 given to shareholder. And am I to understand that this is a government which is pro-poor, this is government which is pro-democratization, they are pro their pockets, and this is a government which deserves, Mr. Speaker, sir, to be removed from this House. Let the people choose. First come with municipal elections, and we are going to trounce you at the next general election, Mr.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, dans quelques minutes, en ce vendredi 13, le leader de l'opposition va soumettre son summing up sur la motion qu'il a introduite. Et c'est bon qu'on parle immédiatement de la teneur des discours tenus par l'opposition. Cette motion d'inconfiance, de censure, est basée uniquement sur le coût de la vie et le pouvoir d'achat. Et on se serait cru dans des débats budgétaires alors que le budget arrive dans quelques semaines. Et c'est là l'incompréhension totale de la population devant la légèreté des arguments de l'opposition. Nous savons tous que le monde est en crise, de la Chine aux États-Unis, de l'Amérique latine l'Afrique et l'Asie, et nous ne sommes pas épargnés. Mais en filigrane de ce discours économique, nous avons noté, la population aura noté, l'appel subtil, et pas aussi subtil que cela parfois, à la violence qu'ont fait quelques orateurs, heureusement pas tous, de l'opposition. Prophètes de malheur, en prédisant que le pays serait à feu et à sang, parce que on se réjouit du malheur du pays. On se réjouit par avance en annonçant pénurie, misère, pas d'avenir pour la jeunesse, presque appelant à l'émigration, parce qu'on ne devrait plus avoir confiance dans le pays. Ça me rappelle certains discours de mon enfance, dans les années 65-68, le même discours qu'on entend, mais auquel aujourd'hui s'associe un parti comme le MMM. Et c'est là où les générations futures vont juger l'opposition d'aujourd'hui. C'est vrai que les prix montent, c'est vrai que le pouvoir d'achat souffre, mais le ministre des Finances sera là bientôt pour nous présenter ses propositions, et c'est là où l'opposition aura l'occasion de s'exprimer sur la politique économique du pays. Non, ils ont choisi de venir avec cette motion de censure comme si une répétition avant l'heure du débat du budget. Cette motion a servi à voir d'un côté la légèreté du débat, du contenu des discours de l'opposition, mais du sérieux des discours du côté du gouvernement. Et cette motion sert à cristalliser la confiance que la population a mis et continue de mettre dans le gouvernement. Et cela est peut-être un grand merci à mettre au crédit du leader de l'opposition pour avoir ainsi donné l'occasion à la population de comprendre le contexte économique, politique et social dans lequel nous vivons. Monsieur le Président, il y a un grand absent dans les discours de l'opposition. Depuis le début de ce présent mandat, depuis 2019, l'opposition a commencé et a continué inlassablement une campagne d'inconfiance dans le gouvernement en disant que le gouvernement avait volé les élections. C'était ça le premier discours de motion de censure contre le gouvernement. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est qu'une petite conclusion de la fin de l'opposition, fin FIN de l'opposition. Aujourd'hui, ce n'est que la conclusion d'un débat qui a commencé en venant dire à la population qu'il ne fallait pas faire confiance aux institutions. Ce n'est pas le MMM, ce n'est pas le Parti travailliste qui avait entré la première pétition électorale. La première pétition électorale fut rentrée contre moi la circonscription numéro 19 par un certain M. Siwoo Chun, du Reform Party, dont l'avocat était maître Rochi Badin. C'est ensuite qu'on a eu la pétition de Mme Adébiro contre moi, copiée un petit peu sur la pétition rédigée par maître Badin. Les pétitions électorales servirent de toile de fond à une campagne visant personnellement le Premier ministre et les ministres du gouvernement. Les pétitions électorales, avec l'aide de certains communicateurs habiles, avaient pour but de déstabiliser le gouvernement pour faire instaurer dans la population un climat d'inconfiance. Cela n'a pas réussi. Les unes après les autres, la plupart des pétitions électorales furent soit retirées, soit rejetées. Et le dernier cas est la pétition de l'avocat maître Adrien Duval, qui n'a pas réussi à convaincre dans la circonscription numéro 17. Mais la plus grande preuve fut la pétition de Mme Adébiro dans ma circonscription elle-même. Les avocats de Mme Adébiro avaient remarqué quelques erreurs dans la récapitulation des résultats. Dès qu'ils avaient attiré notre attention, j'ai demandé à mes avocats de ne pas soulever des points de droit, mais au contraire, de dire à la Cour que je n'avais aucune objection au recount parce que je ne voulais pas qu'il y ait le moindre doute qui puisse subsister sur la validité non seulement de mon élection, mais de l'élection de toute l'Alliance mauricienne en 2019. Ce doute fut vite éclairci. Le recount eut lieu et ne fit que confirmer les résultats de l'élection. Doublement élu. Immédiatement après le MMM, claironna, et il y a des clairons extraordinaires qui claironna leur intention de faire appel. Insatisfait du recount, pourtant mené par le Master et Registrar de la Cour suprême. 3 jours après, Mme Adébiro montra qu'elle n'avait pas confiance dans son propre parti et suscitant honteusement des commentaires de Asté Vendée, après une série de démissions, et à chaque démission, on criait Vendée, Vendée, comme si le parti n'était qu'un ramassis de vendeurs. Mais Madame Adébiro n'est que le petit reflet de tout ce que la population pense. Personne n'a confiance dans l'opposition. Et c'est ainsi que le vote d'aujourd'hui sera un vote de censure contre l'opposition. Nous n'avons pas besoin de sondage. Nous sommes là, le reflet de la population. Le sondage ne fait que conforter la réflexion de tout le monde. Je voudrais, et je n'avais pas l'intention de le faire ni de le dire, mais je voudrais réagir à une réflexion de l'honorable Boulel. Nous sommes 3 députés du ML. Que l'honorable Boulel se tranquillise. Il n'a aucun souci à se faire pour moi, pour mon ami, le Deputy Speaker ou le PPS de Ismaël Raoult de la circonscription numéro 13. Nous sommes toujours ce que nous sommes, mais qu'il n'oublie pas. Le ML fut formé pour barrer la route à la dictature qui s'était instaurée en 2013-2014. Et ils ont le culot de parler de démocratie. Et après que le ML ne fut formé, je pris une décision très grave, celle d'être candidat, non pas à la circonscription numéro 15, où j'aurais été élu confortablement, mais dans la circonscription numéro 19, pour barrer la route à cette même dictature qui se préparait. Et la population nous fit confiance au numéro 19, comme partout dans le pays. Voilà le vote de confiance. Et nous ne sommes pas des quémandeurs, nous ne sommes pas dans le gouvernement, mais nous soutenons le gouvernement. Le ML, nous 3 députés, c'est vrai, nous ne sommes que 3, mais nous viendrons par notre vote venir confirmer à la population, à l'ensemble de notre pays, que notre gouvernement mérite la confiance que la population place dans ce gouvernement et dans son Premier ministre. Et nous souhaitons bonne chance à l'île Maurice, à l'île Rodrigue, à Saint-Brandon, à Galéga, les Chagos, à tout le pays. Merci et que l'opposition continue avec ses balivernes. Merci le Président, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sir, at the outset, I wish to highlight that as Leader of the House, I gave immediate attention to the motion of no confidence presented by the Leader of the Opposition. Only a few days after the motion was submitted to the clerk of the National Assembly, it has appeared, at my request, on the parliamentary agenda for consideration and debates. This is testimony to our firm belief on this side of the House in parliamentary democracy. And this contrasts with the undemocratic doing of the Labour government in 2014, which, in collusion with the then MMM opposition, deliberately closed the National Assembly for almost 9 months to concoct a political alliance to cater for the personal and selfish interests of their respective leaders. And I will come back later to that episode, lorsque notre démocratie parlementaire fut assassinée. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to add that we, on this side of the House, are totally at ease with our conscience as we are dedicating every single minute of our mandate to work for the advancement of the country and the improvement of the quality of life of our population. Despite unprecedented, hard and challenging times, with the onslaught of the COVID-19, which is now being compounded by the negative impact of the war in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, sir, since 2020, with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the whole world has been shaken by an unprecedented socio-economic turmoil, putting at risk the health, jobs, and incomes of millions of people. And as at 11th of May 2022, more than 516 million people had been infected, and there had been more than 6.3 million deaths, according to the World Health Organization. The situation is even more dramatic as the figures that I have just mentioned exclude data from the African region. And I need not refer to the last comment that was made by the World Health Organization, stating that the number of deaths could be even more than the official figure that has been announced by themselves. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the leader of the opposition, I believe, will have time to sum up. And just as he wouldn't like to be interrupted, I also would not like to be interrupted. So I seek your protection, Mr. Speaker, sir. The International Labour Organization has estimated around 52 million fewer jobs in 2022 than at pre-COVID levels. 52 million fewer jobs. Global debt has risen to $256 trillion by the end of 2020. And according to UNCTAD, small island developing states experience an estimated fall in their GDP of 9% in 2020, compared with a 3.3% decline in other developing countries based on IMF projections data. As we know, Mr. Speaker, sir, the SIDS economies are highly dependent on tourism, and they have been even more affected, with their GDP falling by more than 12%. That is, in summary, how the world socio-economic order has drastically changed with COVID-19. And as I said, presently, the turmoil has been exacerbated by the Ukrainian war. And Mauritius is, of course, no exception. Our economy has been badly hit. And our people, I have stated in numerous occasions, they are feeling the brunt of this unprecedented situation that no government since independence has had to face. But it appears that members of the opposition, they are really, in fact, living on another planet. They are either oblivious to, or they are trying to minimize the worldwide impacts of the war in Ukraine and its enormous human and economic consequences that continue to unfold. But we do not think that they are so naive as to maintain that a country with an open economy like ours could have shielded itself completely from the deleterious effects of such drastic global turmoil. It is clear, though, that they have a different agenda, which is to stir instability in the country by all means. And I say by all means. This is what we've been witnessing recently. The leader of the opposition said, never waste a good crisis. Several times he has been saying that. For him and his friends in the opposition, it means capitalizing on the present crisis to push forward their own sinister agenda. And this motion of no confidence, in fact, betrays their bad faith and exposes their real motives. In their desperate attempts to discredit and destabilize the government, they are deliberately instigating people to take to the streets. Because we see repeatedly what they are saying. Look what is happening in Sri Lanka. And I know, I don't know if the Honorable Leader of the Opposition is aware. I know what is being said in some private meetings. I must say, I think I'm quite well informed of some people, some members of the opposition, telling people, I will tell you, if you want, I can tell you, in private I can tell you. Yes, don't want to mention names in the house, but there are some people, some members of the opposition, who've been saying on several occasions, trying to incite people to go and create disorder. I remember very well when there was the lockdown, how some members were trying to instigate people to go and to break in supermarkets and shops. One member even had put on the social media a video to say that a member of the Labour Party was saying, look, the Prime Minister, Pravin Jagannath, he has food, plenty of food at his place. But we don't have any food. And what do you want me to do? What do you want us to do? I don't want to go into all these examples of how, when we are facing a double crisis, some people want to surf on that double crisis, to create havoc, and to create disorder, and to try to destabilize our institutions and the government. We have seen how some members of the opposition, I'm talking about not only members of the National Assembly, but other frontline members, I would call them frontline members of their own party, of their respective party, supporting publicly the mob that acted violently in Port Louis on the night of 22nd and 23rd of April of this year. They are trying to play cheap politics on the back of a world phenomenon that has taken all countries by bitter surprise. Fortunately, Mr. Speaker, sir, for our country and our people, they are failing in their disgraceful attempts, as this government has proved that it can and is dealing with these imposed and daunting challenges with courage, compassion, and proactive decisions, acknowledged by a majority of our population. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the face of the global crisis, we have managed in Mauritius to weather the COVID-19 storm successfully both on the health and the socio-economic fronts. We are also doing our best to shield our people and our economy from the consequences of the Ukrainian war. I must say we have no visibility. What is going to happen in the future? Tensions which are even growing with certain speeches from people who are leaders of their countries who are directly involved in this conflict. What awaits us in the near future? Time only will tell. How we are going to face a situation where there is major disruption in the production of basic commodities. We are talking about rising prices. There is a real risk that there is a shortage of commodities on the world market. And the opposition doesn't see that. And as I say, it is not government that is saying that. International organizations, if I can take for our response to the COVID-19 shock, have commended us on the effectiveness of our response. We were praised, Mr. Speaker, sir, by the World Bank for our health response to the pandemic and to the measures that we have taken to keep households and companies afloat, protect jobs and incomes, and shield the economy from a collapse. The World Bank commented that, and I quote, Mauritius responded to the COVID-19 shock with one of the largest support packages in the world as a share of GDP, unquote. The World Health Organization commended Mauritius for delivering a highly successful health response to COVID-19. BMG Global Health highlighted, and I quote, the COVID-19 response in Mauritius, which is viewed as a success story, benefited from strong leadership, highest political engagement, and strong involvement of the WHO, the private sector, and other key stakeholders, unquote. This is not the MSM. This is not any party who has a privileged relationship with these organizations. These are respected organizations. And these are their views. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I stated while answering the last PNQ of the Leader of the Opposition, since December 2014, when the electorate entrusted us with the responsibility to govern the country, we have been taking a multitude of decisions and measures to improve the purchasing power and the quality of life of the population. Our response to COVID-19 and to the adverse effects of the Ukrainian war has again been motivated by our political philosophy to put our people first by protecting lives and jobs and preventing closures of enterprises while giving special attention to the most vulnerable. The House will recall that I said we will do whatever it takes to help our people and businesses through this crisis. And we did just that with all the support and swift measures that we took, the safety net that we placed on businesses, and the unprecedented offer of support that we have given to workers. We are pursuing our efforts along those same lines. Let me mention once again some of the measures taken by government since December 2014. Increase in basic retirement pension from 3,623 rupees to 9,000 rupees. increase in other basic pensions, including invalidity pension, introduction of the subsistence allowance scheme, whereby a subsistence allowance is paid on a monthly basis to families living in absolute poverty. This is the first time that such a measure is being implemented. Introduction of negative income tax. Again, a first time. Introduction of minimum salary, which now stands at 11,075 rupees. Grant of full yearly salary compensations from 2015 to 2022. Payment of PRB 2016 and PRB 2021. Maintaining free travel schemes for seniors and students. Subsidy on SC and HSE fees. Free tertiary education in public institutions. Subsidy on purchase of water tanks. 6 meter cube of water and wastewater charges free. And increased subsidies in rice, flour, and LPG. Mr. Speaker, sir, the grand total of the measures for the period December 2014 to June 2020 amounted to 112 billion rupees. This represented unprecedented additional revenue given to the Mauritian households. And never before in the history of our country has any government done so much to reduce inequality and promote inclusiveness. Mr. Speaker, sir, in addition to the measures that I've just mentioned, this government has taken numerous other initiatives targeted at our compatriots at the lower rungs of the ladder and who are more vulnerable in such exceptionally challenging times. Let me mention some of those initiatives. Implementation of the Marshall Plan Against Poverty as from the financial year 2016-2017. Additional support to SRM families in the field of education to the tune of 250 million rupees every financial year. For the current financial year, provision of 416.3 million rupees has been made in the budget of the Social Integration Division. From December 2016 to date, funds to the tune of some 400 million rupees have been disbursed under the Child Allowance Scheme. Distribution of food packs during COVID-19 lockdown, the introduction of the Government Wage Assistance Scheme, Self-Employed Assistance Scheme, and Self-Employed One-Off Grant. So far, under these schemes, some 27 billion rupees has been disbursed. The setting up of a COVID-19 Solidarity Fund, out of which 1.7 billion rupees have been disbursed. The grant of SME, interest-free loan from DBM, to help enterprises with turnover of up to 50 million rupees. Introduction of the 1 million SME COVID Special Support Scheme at an interest rate of 0.5%. And grant of subsidies of 1.35 billion rupees, including the additional 150 million rupees provided by government recently on food commodity items that most frequently consumed by Mauritian families. Mr. Speaker, sir, all these measures that I have re-emphasized upon are concrete and palpable. They have been gratefully acknowledged and appreciated by the population, and particularly by the less economically fortunate of our citizens. That counts the most for me and my government. Mr. Speaker, sir, some in the opposition including the leader of the opposition and the former Prime Ministers, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam and Paul Béranger, have alluded that the Mauritian economy was already in the red before the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded. My answer to them is simply to remind them that in July 2020, Mauritius, under my leadership, had officially joined the ranks of high-income countries according to the World Bank. The World Bank added in its 2020 report on Mauritius entitled, "Through the Eye of a Perfect Storm, Coming Back Stronger from the COVID-19 Crisis," that, and I quote, "On July 1st, 2020, Mauritius officially joined the ranks of high-income countries. It is a cruel historical irony that Mauritius reached the high-income milestone during one of the worst years in its history. Mauritius delivered a highly successful health response to the global COVID-19 pandemic through a hard lockdown and subsequent quarantine measures, and as a result has effectively been COVID-free from April 2020 to March 2021, when a second outbreak occurred. Mauritius has so far been able to avoid the large-scale health crisis observed in many other countries. However, COVID-19 has caused severe economic disruptions in Mauritius," unquote. Moreover, we managed to bring down the unemployment rate to 6.7% in 2019. It is therefore clear, Mr. Speaker, sir, that prior to the outbreak of COVID-19, the Mauritian economy had grown steadily to reach the ultimate high-income milestone. But the economy suffered a major setback after the COVID-19 struck and, of course, has pulled us backward. It is appropriate to also mention that Mauritius has been ranked top in Africa in a number of world-recognized indicators, namely the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, the Global Competitiveness Index, the Mo Ibrahim Index of African Governance, the Forbes Survey of Best Countries for Business, the Social Progress Index, and most recently, the Chandler Institute's Good Governance Index. All these recognitions prove that the socio-economic landscape of Mauritius is certainly not as gloomy as the opposition desperately wants people to believe. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition and other members have dared to say that this government is fleecing the people. This is, I must say, totally unfounded, as I proved earlier with facts and figures, testifying the multi-pronged support being given to the population, particularly to the most vulnerable. Some people might have forgotten that this country fell to the brink of havoc under the reign of the Labour Party and the PMSD during the 2005-2010 period. They pretended in those days, you will recall their slogan, to put people first. Instead, they put themselves first. And they delivered absolute poverty. For the first time in our country, we had a category to be named absolute poverty. Confronted with the financial crisis of 2008, which was nothing comparable to the COVID-19 crisis, they decided to align themselves with the economic elite and put the reform burden solely on the population. In fact, they were the ones who fleeced the population to the bones. I will recall to the House how they introduced the new taxes, like the national property tax, tax on interest, tax on cooperative societies, a levy on short message service, SMS. They abolished subsidies on SC and HSC examination fees. Can you imagine that? And this is the Labour Party. And a number of tax exemptions also, which they abolished. They even attempted to remove that piece of bread that was distributed to school children and abolish subsidies on rice and flour. And what, Mr. Speaker, sir, what was the budget at that time that was being spent on this bread? Huh? It's a shame. Prior to 2008, they deliberately depreciated the rupee by more than 20% to dope economic growth, as ascertained by many economists, in fact, including some who are very close to the Labour Party. And that resulted in commodity prices soaring to unbearable levels. And in those times, absolutely no support was given to the workers. Instead, workers were deprived of their dues in terms of salary compensation with the advent of the National Pay Council. You will recall what gimmick they had made of the National Pay Council. They came up with a formula which really, in fact, compensated workers below the rate of inflation. And to add insult to injury, the labor laws were amended to give the employers the right to fire upon their whims and caprices. All that misery was imposed on the population at a time when there was no COVID-like situation. We can imagine how the population would have been tortured had the then government been in power in the present unprecedented circumstances. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition and some members have tenuously dared to criticize the government had not adjusted the basic retirement pension to inflation. I don't know whom they want to convince or whom they want to mislead. We know that the basic retirement pension has been increased by 148.4% in the 2015 to 2019 period. This speaks of volumes of the attention and consideration that we have given to old age pensioners who are grateful to this government and condemn, I'm sure, the demagogy of the opposition. With regard to public debt, we all know that worldwide the recommended debt thresholds have gone bust in view of the massive financial resources that were deployed to respond to COVID-related social and economic crises. According to the World Economic Forum, falling revenues combined with costly pandemic relief measures have increased global debt by $20 trillion since the third quarter of 2019. Japan's debt to GDP ratio increased to 257%, the highest of any advanced economy. Sudan's debt to GDP ratio increased to 210%, the highest for Africa. Singapore debt reached 138% of its GDP. France's debt reached 116% of its GDP. Mozambique debt reached 134% of its GDP. Now you're comparing Maldives. I heard earlier somebody talking about Maldives. Look at Maldives. They are receiving so many tourists and so on. Maldives, 137%. Why don't you compare with Maldives now on the debt issue? Angola, 104%. And Zambia, 101%. For Mauritius, the public debt officially stood at 88.6% of GDP as at March 2022, as opposed, yes, to 65.5% in December 2019. The increase, of course, is mainly attributable to the massive funds that had to be disbursed by government to protect lives and livelihoods in the aftermath of COVID-19. Could we have done otherwise, Mr. Speaker, sir? Could other countries also have done otherwise? Is the opposition saying that we should have left the people to die and lose their jobs Are they on the other side of the house saying we should have left enterprises to close business? Or were they waiting for havoc to strike the country so that they gain political mileage? Mr. Speaker, sir, we are also very concerned by the increase of public debt to GDP. The economic impact of the Ukrainian war is putting still more pressure on government finances. But we have pledged to bring public debt down over time, and that is a commitment that we will keep. Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition has also alleged that this government has wasted money in implementing, amongst others, they have mentioned the Safe City project, the Côte d'Or Sports Complex. I would say this is again plain demagogy. The Director of Audit in his last report has made it clear that, I quote, "The Safe City project infrastructure has helped the police service to resolve 254 cases during the period January 2019 to November 2021. The number of resolved cases was on increasing trend due to progress in installation of cameras," unquote. And that is why, when you see some members of the opposition who have been supporting those mobsters who have in fact damaged Safe City cameras in certain regions, in certain parts of the island, knowing full well what they were doing in order that they could continue with the business of going against the law. The Safe City cameras, Mr. Speaker, sir, have proven to be an effective deterrent for potential offenders and criminals. And the success of this project has been such that requests have been made by members of parliament of the opposition side for the installation of these cameras in their constituencies or in regions where they consider this to be necessary. As regards money spent in the Côte d'Or Sports Complex, it represents for us an investment in the youth of our country. We believe in the potential of our young people, and we have provided them with the state-of-the-art infrastructure for them to develop that potential fully and honor our flag in regional and international sports competition. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to cooking gas, we have always been conscious of the need for this product to remain affordable at all times. It is worth emphasizing that in March 2012, under a Labour PMSD government, the price of 12-kilo cylinder reached an unprecedented peak of 330 rupees. At that time, the purchasing price of a 12 kg cylinder on the international market was less than 600 rupees, whereas today we are purchasing at 662 rupees and consumers are buying at a retail price of 240 rupees. That proves we are still heavily subsidizing LPG and supporting households. It is worth mentioning for the attention of the demagogues that the MSM, I say the MSM-led government, decided to bring down the price of 12 kg cylinder to 270 rupees in August 2016, 240 rupees in June 2018, 210 rupees in June 2019, and 180 rupees in June 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, as for the prices of mogas and gas oil, recent increases were dictated by soaring import prices which have eroded the stabilization fund of the STC. Immediately after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the price of Brent on the international market started escalating to reach unprecedented heights in the first weeks of March 2022, resulting in the petroleum hub market being highly volatile and unpredictable. And as a responsible government, we could not fold our arms and leave the finances of the STC to deteriorate. Perhaps it would be appropriate also to remind the population that the Labour PMSD government did not hesitate to impose a levy of 3 rupees on each litre of mogas and gas oil after the STC registered losses to the tune of 5.4 billion rupees following irresponsible hedging decisions in 2008. In fact, I reduced that burden that was imposed on the population when I became Minister of Finance in 2010 by reducing the levy to 1.1 rupee 50 for mogas and 1 rupee for gas oil. Mr. Speaker, sir, we continue to ensure that basic necessities are offered at an affordable price. In this respect, government has maintained the price of the scheduled bread, that is the pain maison, to 2 rupees 60. Mr. Speaker, sir, coming again to the assertion of the Leader of the Opposition as to the alleged inaction of government with regard to price increases, I wish to state that as a result of a consultation with importers and the MCCI, the following measures have been taken and are underway. The current price of and subsidy on food items under control is being reviewed to further protect consumers. The markup on a number of medicines in Mauritius is being reviewed downwards in order to allow these medicines to be affordable to the public. A ministerial committee has been set up to look into additional measures to further support the population, and the subsidy is being increased on a long-grain white rice and flour to maintain them at their current price in spite of the massive increase in their prices worldwide. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the Opposition and Honorable Béranger have both argued that democracy is in decline because of the supposed postponement of municipal elections. First of all, let me make it clear that government has extended the life of the municipal councils in order to protect the health of the population from any possible flare-up of the COVID-19. The elections may be conducted at any time within the extended period, should the COVID-19 situation so allow, of course. Mr. Speaker, sir, I hasten to add that the COVID-19 situation in Mauritius is still under control, and this has been achieved thanks to the enlightened guidance of the high-level committee, the exceptional efforts and collaboration of our health authorities, our health workers, and our other frontliners, and also the collaboration, the sacrifice, the discipline of the population in general. However, as we all know, we are not out of the woods yet insofar as the COVID-19 is concerned, as we are still recording cases of local transmission, although the figure has gone down quite a lot. There is therefore a need for all of us and for the government above all to remain vigilant and continue to exercise great care and caution in the management of the COVID-19 crisis. This is the reason why government has maintained the quarantine period along with certain restriction measures. Mr. Speaker, sir, I heard the Leader of the Opposition saying that the sanitary restriction should now be removed. For the information of the House, and particularly for him, I would like to quote here the Director General of the World Health Organization, who, in his opening remarks on Member State Information Session on COVID-19, stated on 14th April 2022, I quote, "We are pleased to see a downward trend, but the pandemic is still far from over. Transmissions remains very high, and the relaxation of many public health and social measures is allowing continued transmission with the risk of new variants emerging." This week, the COVID-19 IRH Emergency Committee met and unanimously agreed that the pandemic remains a public health emergency. I appreciate their advice and agree that far from being the time to drop our guard, this is the moment to work even harder to save lives. This virus has over time become more transmissible and it remains deadly, unquote. Yesterday, at the second Global COVID-19 Summit, the Director General of the World Health Organization again reminded world leaders that, and I quote, although reported cases and deaths are now decreasing globally, it is misguided to think this pandemic is over. The pandemic is not over anywhere until it is over everywhere. In fact, cases are increasing in more than 70 countries. At the same time, testing rates globally are plummeting, making us blind to the evolution of the virus, unquote. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also apposite for me to mention here what had been reported by the WHO for the epidemiological week spanning from the 4th to the 10th of April 2022. The report said that there had been a twofold increase in the COVID-19 cases in 7 countries, with 32 countries registering more new cases. These had been attributed to the premature lifting off of public health and social measures, and possibly due to the circulation of the XE recombinant variant of Omicron, which is 10 times more contagious than the BA2 lineage of the Omicron variant. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also remind that postponement of municipal council elections in Mauritius is not something new. As a matter of fact, the Local Government Act has been amended or repealed and replaced by a new one by different governments on not less than 5 occasions to either postpone or prepone the municipal city council and municipal town council elections, namely in 2005, 2010, 2011, 2015, and 2021. It may also be apposite for me to remind here of the amendments brought to the Constitution in 1969 by the then Labour-led government to extend the life of the parliament elected in August 1967. And there was no pandemic at that time. We all know that the move was part of a coalition deal with the PMSD of late Sir Gaëtan Duval, a deal which also comprised an increase in the number of ministers from 15 to 21 to accommodate elected members of the PMSD. And a few years later, in 1973, the then Labour PMSD-led government also abolished by-elections in Mauritius. It was only in 1982 that the incoming government, led by late Sir Anirudh Jagnat, introduced necessary constitutional amendments to inter alia, restore by-elections, and limit the life of Parliament to 5 years. And it is the same Labour Party and PMSD which today are talking about decline of democracy. What an irony. Mr. Speaker, sir, according to international IDEA, and from February 2020 to February 2022, at least 80 countries and territories across the globe have decided to postpone national and local elections due to COVID-19, out of which at least 42 countries and territories have decided to postpone national elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will recall that the Rodrigues Regional Assembly elections were initially scheduled for 13th of February 2022. And at that time, the time of announcement of these elections, Rodrigues was COVID-19 free. However, the first case of COVID-19 in the local community in Rodrigues was detected on 26th of January 2022. There was subsequently a sharp rise in the number of daily local cases detected. The elections were consequently postponed to 27th of February 2022. But it is a fact that many electors who were contaminated with COVID-19 could not exercise their voting rights. Nevertheless, thanks to the prompt and effective response of central government, our health authorities and the Rodrigues Regional Assembly, we managed to contain the further spread of the virus on the island. Mr. Speaker, sir, it should also be brought out that the number of registered electors for the Rodrigues Regional Assembly election in 2021 was 31,450, while the total number of registered electors for the municipal councils elections in Mauritius is 387,051. And in case the municipal council elections were to be held in June 2022, the risk of further spread of the virus would therefore be much higher, and taking containment measures would be much more difficult and obviously more costly. Many electors and even possibly candidates could have been infected and consequently unable to exercise their rights and take part in the elections. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the 2020 village council elections, I must say that at the time of the elections were held, that is on 22nd November 2020, Mauritius was COVID-19 safe with no cases in the local community. Mr. Speaker, sir, the leader of the opposition has argued that elections have been held recently in other countries like France, England, and India, despite the prevalence of COVID-19 in these countries. And therefore, municipal council elections in Mauritius can and should be held after the budgetary exercise. I believe that we should compare like with like. The countries that have been mentioned are endowed with massive resources, and they have enormous capacity for resilience as compared to Mauritius, which remains highly vulnerable to such shocks. We cannot take such risks, especially at this particular juncture, where we are investing massively in our economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me also reassure the House that the extension of the life of the municipal councils will neither undermine the rights of our city and town dwellers, nor our democratic processes. Government will continue to provide all the necessary resources to the municipal councils for them to continue to discharge their mandate in an effective manner and to ensure the well-being of the city and town dwellers. Moreover, councillors in post will continue to be held accountable for the management of the business of their councils. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are all aware that the international context remains very difficult and unpredictable. Along with the rest of the world, Mauritius also is facing tough challenges, and the road ahead is hazy. It is therefore essential for us as a nation to get our priorities right. There is no time for demagogy. We need to rise above partisan politics when it comes to the health of our population and our national safety and security. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the Opposition and Honorable Mohammed brandished the report of the Director of Audit and the report of the Public Accounts Committee to support their arguments in favor of the motion. As I stated in my reply to Parliamentary Question B213 on 12th of April last, the Director of Audit and the Public Accounts Committee have, in all their previous reports, to all governments, made criticisms on the management of public funds and also made recommendations. This is certainly not something new. And may I remind the Leader of the Opposition of a few observations made by the Director of Audit in his report. During the years the Leader of the Opposition was holding the portfolio of Minister of Finance, that is between 2011 to 2014. In his 2011 report, the Director of Audit reported that the extension of completion time to contractors had resulted in an additional cost of 1.16 billion rupees by the Wastewater Management Authority. In the following year, in 2012, the Director of Audit made the following criticisms, amongst others. Wastage of public funds, an additional cost of 864 million rupees for the Plen Williams sewage project by the Ministry of Public Utilities. Delay and non-completion of 127 projects which had started in 2010 at a cost of 900 million rupees. Overpayment of pensions, 58 million rupees. In 2014, the Director of Audit drew attention to an irrecoverable arrears of 4.8 billion rupees by the Mauritius Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, sir, we in the opposition at that time, we neither called for the government to step down, nor did we table any motion of no confidence. And I think what is important is that we accept criticisms when they are justified, of course, and we try to take corrective measures so as to improve over time our public sector financial management and accountability framework. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Béranger spoke about crise démocratique and the need for electoral reform. Well, let me remind him and members of the opposition that in December 2018, the government did introduce the Constitution Amendment Bill, which aimed precisely at reforming our electoral system by introducing a dose of proportional representation, making provision for better women representation, and more importantly, doing away with the mandatory declaration of community by prospective candidates at a general election. However, it is a matter of deep regret that the bill did not get the support of the then opposition for it to be passed by the National Assembly. Same happened. The financing of political party bill introduced by government in July 2019. The reasons that were put forward by the then opposition not to support the bill were, to say the least, frivolous. And now they have the cheek to speak of déficit démocratique. In fact, they should be speaking of déficit de crédibilité for themselves, as their thesis of élection truquée are falling apart, judgment after judgment in court. I was also proposing to dwell on that issue, but Honorable Ivan Kolenda-Velu has remarkably, in fact, made a speech which really tells the situation, what has been the stand of the opposition since the beginning of this mandate. Out of 11 petitions that were lodged before the Supreme Court, 8 have been set aside with costs. Now the remaining 3. There's a judgment which is being awaited in the case where the petitioner is Mr. Suren Dayal against me and my 2 colleagues of constituency number 8. There is the petition in constituency number 10, which is coming for mention on the 17th of May, 2022. And there is another petition, constituency number 15, that will be heard in July 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me somehow make a passing remark with regard to the petition in constituency number 10, where it is clear that after those judgments of the Supreme Court, the petitioner is... Let me listen to what I'm saying before you say sub judice. Listen, you already conclude sub judice. I am not going to make any comment on the substance, on the merit of the case. What I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, after we have seen all those petitions that have been thrown out by the court, it is clear that there is a delaying tactic from the petitioner to drag the case further and further. This is what is happening. But in their despair, in the face of so many electoral petitions that they are losing in court, they even dared to attack the electoral commissioner, the office of the electoral commissioner. Even the Electoral Supervisory Commission, both independent bodies recognized internationally for their capacity to organize elections efficiently. What a shame, Mr. Speaker, sir. How low can they stoop? Mr. Speaker, sir, this government fully adheres to the tenets of democracy, such as the rule of law, protected rights and freedoms, as well as free and fair elections. I must remind that Mauritius regularly achieves very high scores in reliable studies that classify and rate the state of democracy in different countries. For example, in the EIU Democracy Index that was published by the Economist Intelligence Unit this year, Mauritius is listed as one of the 21 countries in the world classified as a full democracy. In fact, Mauritius is ranked 19th in this snapshot of the state of world democracy for 165 countries. Mauritius is considered as the only fully functional democracy in Africa on this list, which comprises 44 African countries. Significantly, Mauritius obtained a total score of 8.08 out of 10. 5 essential criteria have been taken into account for the ranking of Mauritius for full democracy, namely the electoral process and pluralism, the functioning of the government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. And it is noted that Mauritius scored 9.17 out of 10 for its electoral process. These prove again that democracy is in no way in jeopardy in Mauritius, as the opposition wants us to believe. Mr. Speaker, sir, with relation to the removal, let me come to this, the removal from Mauritius of the Slovak national, Mr. Piu. I and institutions of this country have been wrongly accused by some attention-seeking individuals of flouting an order of the Supreme Court. And that was nothing but a political plot against our motherland. And I proved the utter bad faith of the opposition and exposed the ill intent when I answered the PQ B325 on Tuesday's sitting. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me seize this opportunity to set the record straight in relation to a remark made by the Honorable Utim on Tuesday, 10th of May 2022. Following my reply to PQ B525, alleging that in the case of this Slovak national, the judge of the Supreme Court had ordered that the matter be referred to the DPP for prosecution. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is totally wrong. In fact, what the judge had ordered was that the matter be referred to the DPP for any action he deemed appropriate. What a shame for this honorable member to come in this house to misquote, misstate what a judge of the Supreme Court has said in his judgment. You should at least apologize for that. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me forcefully reiterate that this government will always uphold the rule of law. We believe that compliance with judicial decisions and court orders is a key element of good governance. We are aware that in their inconsiderate quest for power, some opposition politicians and agitators will stop at nothing to undermine the credibility of national institutions. They may even have recourse to extreme methods to achieve their ends. Monsieur le Président, certains membres de l'opposition en face ont osé défendre un trafiquant, un homme condamné en Slovaquie pour fabrication, possession, trafic de drogue. Ils se sont mis dans le camp d'un marchand de la drogue, d'un marchand de la mort. Ils ont soutenu un homme dangereux qui voulait contracter un mariage de convenance avec une Mauricienne pour se réfugier dans notre pays et faire son odieux business et mettre en péril la vie de nos enfants. Ils se rangent du côté de la mafia de la drogue. Leur masque tombe, Monsieur le Président. Et ils osent nous accuser. Cette opposition est indigne et suscite le mépris. Le peuple saura, j'en suis convaincu, juger ces membres de l'opposition en temps et lieu. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like now to refer again to the violent demonstrations that have taken place in several parts of the country on 22nd of April. There are numerous indications that a concerted attempt was made to disturb peace in the country. Police had to take some strong measures to quell violence caused by the aggressive protesters. Police restored law and order quickly and efficiently, but we had regretfully to deplore that during the clashes, 21 police officers and 1 firefighter sustained serious injuries, a fact which the leader of the opposition seemed to be unaware of or chose to obliterate in his speech. 2 other persons, unfortunately, were also injured. There were also considerable damages to infrastructure, which will have to be repaired at taxpayers' expense. But what is more serious, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the ensuing bad publicity for the country, especially for the tourism sector, at a time when the government is devoting so much efforts and resources to our economic recovery program. Monsieur le Président, de par leurs actes antipatriotiques, certains ont voulu saboter l'économie du pays, et cela est impardonnable. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are fully alive to the risks that organized crime and political propagandists will try to wreak havoc whenever that serves their selfish interests. A responsible government cannot simply turn a blind eye when flags are signaling potential illegal activities of organized crime. We have to respond appropriately. It is our duty to do our utmost to guarantee security and law and order for Mauritian citizens and visitors. A zero-tolerance policy is being adopted. We shall stand firm and strong against those unpatriotic demolition experts and agitators, recklessly bent on creating havoc and at destabilizing the country and the population. Police will show no leniency towards those who are bent on creating disorder and anarchy in the country. Terror plots will be busted in the same way in which police just foiled a suspected attempt to carry out major blasts targeting state buildings. A well-coordinated operation conducted by several units of the police force led to the arrest of a 26-year-old suspect on 2nd of May in Rosebois, after a loaded firearm, bullets, and dynamite sticks, as well as pellets of heroin were found at his home. Police is investigating whether the suspect is part of a drug trafficking network which intended to commit terrorist acts across the country. And those people are being defended by whom, Mr. Speaker, sir? They are being defended by whom? Those people who form part of a group, they call themselves Avengers. They are Avengers, and the Avengers, there are people in the Avengers who are also part of l'Alliance de l'Espoir, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the kind of hope they have for the country. These are the people who together now, they are defending those drug traffickers, those who want to create instability in the country. We must understand that the fight against the immensely rich and powerful drug barons is not an easy battle. We know they are financing some politicians and agitators. But my government will spare no effort to track down the drug traffickers. We are also unflinchingly committed to fight any sort of mafia wherever they may be. Unlike the opposition, we shall never defend criminals or people engaged in illegal activities. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is fitting that I commend our police force for the tangible results that its efforts have yielded in that respect. Police had made record drug seizures arrested several drug barons and dismantled several drug rings in the past few years. Mr. Speaker, sir, some members of the opposition have referred to scandals, which according to them warrant a no confidence vote. I must reiterate that I have been at all times consistent in my response to such allegations. I have said time and again that most of the allegations were unfounded and frivolous. Others were referred to the appropriate authorities for inquiry, and appropriate actions would be taken in the light of the findings. I also stated that whoever are found to be responsible would have to assume their responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also an opportunity for me to go down memory lane to demonstrate what my party, the MSM, has achieved for this country and its people. Because when I listened to Honorable Boulel's speech, it was not a support of motion of confidence against the government. It is like a motion of no confidence against the MSM party, against Pravin Jagnnath as leader of the MSM. I think he's got himself confused. So let me go down to memory lane. History, Honorable Boulel, if you can listen to what I'm going to say, is there to testify that in 1982, the Labour Party and the PMSD had turned the hope ensuing from independence into nightmare. Qui ne se rappelle pas de la situation de misère noire et de désespoir qui prévalait dans le pays après 14 ans d'indépendance? Le pays était à genoux, l'économie avait subi les contre-coups de deux dévaluations successives de la roupie. Il y avait plus de 80 000 chômeurs. Il y avait à peine des réserves pour 10 jours d'importation des denrées essentielles. Voilà, en bref, le bilan de la gestion du pays entre 1968 et 1982. History is also there to testify that, as from 1983, there was a new ray of hope and the country was steered by the then visionary and avant-garde Prime Minister, Sir Anirudh Jagnnath, towards an economic miracle which the IMF and the World Bank cited as a stunning example of belief, vision, and achievements. From misery, Sir Anirudh Jagnnath delivered prosperity. Le MSM à la tête du pays a fait démentir la prophétie de James Meade, qui avait prévu un avenir sombre pour Maurice après l'indépendance. Et il est bon de souligner que sans le développement économique que le pays a vécu dans les années 80 et en début 90, l'État-providence aurait bel et bien disparu. Now let me come to 2000, after the first 5 years of the reign of the Labour Party under the leadership of Dr. Navin Ramgoolam. Again, they left a country and an economy which were at the doldrums. At that point in time, the best description of the socio-economic mess that prevailed was provided by Dr. Ramasitanen. He said, and I quote, high spending, high taxing government, and I say that for Honorable Ramphul, because at that time, maybe he was having biberon. He was not yet in the Labour Party. Listen to what Dr. Sitanen said. High spending, high taxing government. En 5 ans, entre 1995 et 2000, le constat est que le gouvernement travailliste est friand d'augmentation de 100%. Ainsi, au cours de cette période, les dépenses publiques sont passées de 18 milliards à 36 milliards. Les recettes de taxes directes, indirectes ont augmenté de 11 milliards à 22 milliards. Et le servicing de la dette, servicing, you like to talk about servicing, de 3,6 milliards à 7,2 milliards. C'est de l'irresponsabilité. Nous avons battu le record de l'Argentine qui a doublé ses dépenses et sa dette publique en 10 ans. Unquote. These remarks are made towards your leader, your actual leader, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam. Et comment oublier le tristement célèbre Macarena Party d'Albion, qui était le symbole d'un régime qui puait l'indécence et l'immoralité. Venons-en maintenant au deuxième gouvernement de 2005 à 2009. Que retient-on? D'abord, que l'ancien Premier ministre et son ministre des Finances avait fait miroiter des objectifs de croissance économique qui n'ont jamais été atteints. Deuxièmement, la population avait été saignée à blanc avec l'introduction de multiples taxes et une dépréciation massive de plus de 20% de la roupie qui avait fait flamber les prix et affecter le pouvoir d'achat. J'en ai fait mention auparavant dans mon intervention. L'histoire, Monsieur le Président, a aussi retenu que j'ai démontré dans le budget de 2010 qu'il y avait bel et bien d'autres alternatives, sans alourdir le fardeau fiscal de la population. J'avais mis de côté toutes les mesures de Ramgoolam et Sitanen qui avaient asphyxié le peuple. Je me suis mis aux côtés du peuple et le MSM, fort de ses convictions socialistes, a quitté le gouvernement en juillet 2011 sur fond de divergence sur plusieurs dossiers. En 2011 et 2014, l'économie s'est retrouvée encore une fois entre les mains d'un gouvernement incompétent qui avait augmenté la dette publique de 177,8 milliards de roupies à 237,7 milliards de roupies, une augmentation de 33,7%, soit à 60,6% du PIB. Le taux de chômage avait grimpé à 8%, mais pire encore, une crise de confiance avait paralysé le pays. La République de Maurice était à genoux une nouvelle fois. Suivant une étude auprès des chefs d'entreprise en 2012, la situation économique et la crise de confiance qui prévalait étaient décrites par la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie comme suit. Et je cite, « Que ce soit la perception des entrepreneurs sur la situation économique et celle de leurs entreprises, le niveau des commandes fermes, l'évolution des affaires et les perspectives d'embauche, les opinions sont négatives. » Fin de citation. En juillet 2013, une autre étude de la Chambre de commerce et d'industrie concluait que la perception était encore plus négative, que le pays était dans une période de continued uncertainty. Et pendant que le peuple et l'économie subissaient, la sirène et son séducteur prenaient le pays en otage et s'amusaient sur le dos du peuple dans un élan d'immoralité et de népotisme devenu infernal. Qui ne se souvient pas des frasques de la sirène à l'aéroport et à Roche-Noire, entre autres, sans oublier l'épisode de Toussali? Qui ne se souvient pas des contrats mirobolants décrochés par Airway Coffee de la sirène dans l'enceinte aéroportuaire? Le peuple sait qui sont ceux au pouvoir qui ont toujours ruiné le pays, mis la population dans une situation de vulnérabilité et d'hypothéquer l'avenir de la nation. Ces mêmes individus, ces amoureux d'hédonisme, qui ont tout le temps abusé le pouvoir et mis le pays à genoux, osent aujourd'hui nous pointer du doigt. Nous n'avons absolument aucune leçon à prendre de ces irresponsables. À chaque fois que le pays a fait appel au MSM dans des situations pénibles, nous avons répondu présent et redressé la barre. Le peuple le sait et nous fait confiance. C'est ce qui importe le plus pour nous. Monsieur le Président, permettez-moi de revenir sur cette année sombre de notre pays en ce qui concerne la démocratie parlementaire. L'année où le Premier ministre d'alors et le leader de l'opposition d'alors, en complicité, ferment l'Assemblée nationale pendant 9 mois pour négocier une alliance qu'on appelait auparavant, le prélude de l'alliance s'appelait le on and off, selon leur convenance, sur le dos du peuple. Aujourd'hui aussi, c'est un peu le on and off. Mais c'est un peu différent ce on and off aujourd'hui. Le leader de l'opposition s'était accroché à son siège et de par son acte, il avait provoqué un dysfonctionnement de notre système parlementaire en empêchant le président de la République de nommer un autre leader de l'opposition. Et ces politiciens osent nous accuser de tuer la démocratie. Monsieur le Président, le peuple n'est pas dupe. Les vrais patriotes, les vrais démocrates sont de ce côté de la Chambre. Même pendant la période où le Covid-19 atteignit ses pointes à Maurice, ce gouvernement a pris les dispositions pour que l'Assemblée nationale continue de siéger. Et si devant leur petit écran, les Mauriciens peuvent suivre les débats parlementaires en direct, c'est grâce au gouvernement mené par le MSM. C'est cela l'œuvre des démocrates que nous sommes. Monsieur le Président, la motion du leader de l'opposition sera rejetée, pas seulement par cette Chambre, mais également par la grande majorité de nos compatriotes. Laissons alors les prétendus donneurs de leçons et faux sauveurs à leur sale besogne. Le pays saura les juger une nouvelle fois le moment venu. Mr. Speaker, sir, fake and bogie Democrats will continue with their fake news, their misinformation and disinformation campaign, their deliberate distortion and misrepresentation of facts and figures, and with their vain attempts to influence and slant public opinion their own narrow and cheap way. In fact, they have not been, they are not, and shall never be at the heart's ease to see, and they cannot bear to see a non-stop caring and genuinely patriotic and socialism-inspired government in action, not only to protect the country and the population in the face of health and economic hazards, but also to ensure resilience and momentous bouncing back to safety and prosperity. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is written, and I quote, that a motion of no confidence, also called motion of non-confidence, is a parliamentary motion traditionally put before a parliament by the opposition in the hope of defeating or embarrassing a government, unquote. In our case, the question of defeating the government, which holds an overall and comfortable majority, does not arise. Nor does the question of embarrassing the government arise. On the contrary, as I abundantly stated and illustrated in my reply to PNQ of the Leader of the Opposition on Tuesday, 26th of April of this year, government has not been insensitive to the grievances of the population. On the contrary, in fact, and in real terms, no government before 2014 had done so much and concretely to fight poverty and improve the standard of living of the population, particularly the most vulnerable. And I must re-emphasize that the guiding principles of our actions have firmly remained fairness, equity, and inclusiveness. We in government convincingly and continuously place a premium on the common sense and value judgment of the vast majority of our sensible population, while the opposition has at all times since 2015 been trying to poison the minds of some people to stir instability in the country. And this is what the opposition has been attempting to do, again through the present motion of no confidence. Mr. Speaker, sir, ironically, a motion of no confidence in the opposition itself is called for, as the motley of opposition has so often been the subject of adverse media comments, particularly in anti-government media frustrated by the prevarication, internal strife, personal animosity and aversion, overweening personal ambition and ulterior and sinister motives of their political friends and idols in the opposition. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me say one thing in reply to what Honorable Boulel said. He was talking earlier about he was talking about the way we function as a party and so on, and he was criticizing. I think you have, if I can refresh your memory, Honorable Boulel, as a person who has been in the Labour Party, I think since you joined the Labour Party, you call yourself to be the one who is the most eligible in the Labour Party with Labour blood in your veins. If you can recall that you've been bolted out of the executive committee of the Labour Party at the Rosemont Square when you were not allowed entrance. And what did you say? What did you say? You'd say this is the Labour Party where you have thugs, you have bouncers preventing you from getting in. But we know what Dr. Navin Ramulam thinks of you. I think he has been saying it. You are like an is no good. You know, is no good. Trying by all means to try to get this seat, but unfortunately you are not able to. So I wish you good luck, though. As a member of this House, I wish you good luck and hope that you are able to reach, to achieve your objective. Let me conclude, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me again appeal to all our citizens to display their sense of responsibility and to guard themselves against the demagogues bent on poisoning their minds and utilizing them as their tools of destruction. Let us continue to join hands and work together to meet the challenges we are faced with and continue to build the better Mauritius we all dream of. Mr. Speaker, sir, we on this side of the House, we have a clear mandate from the people. We have a clear vision for the future of our country, a vision devoid of potted thinking, a vision, to use the words of Rabindranath Tagore, not lost in the dreary desert sand of dead habit, a habit which regrettably and on the whole characterizes the opposition. We believe in movement forward for our country, while the opposition strives for movement backward. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are doing what we believe is right and in the best interests of the country and our population. We are determined to forge forward and to navigate the treacherous period ahead together and continue our journey towards building a better and brighter future for all, with particular attention to the most vulnerable section of our population. This has been our guiding philosophy all along, and we are going to stick to it come what may. This government has the will and the determination to face the current and upcoming challenges, and we will succeed once again by focusing on the strength of our people and our society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, I'll suspend the sitting for 1.5 hours.